social media reflects the basics of human nature.
It's August 1st, 2020, coming to you fortnightly and forthrightly. This is Season 2, Episode 15. Our segments today, Champions of Liberty. Herman Cain has passed away and the left is dancing on his grave. We're going to talk about the life and career of the recently deceased conservative hero, Herman Cain. They really said that it's a very stable genius, tweets the idea of postponing the election. We'll talk about the backlash from the Twitterverse, as well as what the federal law has to say about it. Bad ideas that will not die, affordable housing, rescinding the AFFH. Can Trump even screw up his good policies? Ain't nobody's business but my own. Americans seem more vocal than ever, but data suggests people are afraid to speak out on both sides. This is Season 2, Episode 15, and this is the Barney and Clyde Show. Welcome back to the Digital Libation Station. Barney, quick.
The premise of the show, when we're not dealing with a pandemic in post-America, is that we gather, the two of us gather at my bar, which is down in the basement across the room from my office, and if it's the daytime, we have something interesting, but anyway, and then if it's closer to evening, we get something a little more spiritus, perhaps. But Clyde's so good about digging up these interesting things. We're doing midday type stuff, even though it's getting closer to evening now.
It's interesting that you say that because what we have today is Malta, India.
Yeah, you left this on my front patio earlier.
It's kind of like it's between cocktail hour and kiddie beverage hour. It's sort of like 5 p.m. exactly. So you could be drinking if you want to. No, this is a malt beverage. There's no alcohol in it.
Okay.
And the reason I think it's perfect for an in-between regular hour and cocktail hour is because it's sort of like an unfermented beer. It's exactly the same process as beer. They take barley, water, hops, and they boil the malted barley to extract the sugars, just like they would when brewing beer. This is actually made by a company that also makes beer. And they produce the wort. They like unfermented beer. It's called wort.
Yes, okay.
And I did home brewing for years. My brother was a commercial brewer for some time, and I used to love to drink my home brew just as the wort before the fermentation because barley, when it's malted, is very, very sweet, and a lot of sugar, candy, and sugar extract used to come from malt before they had the ability to highly refine sugars. So this is a really good in between beer and soda.
Okay.
So I'm going to pour it into my fancy schmancy Clyde mug.
I'm going to just kind of drink it out of the long.
Take it straight up. So yeah. Have you ever drank unfermented wort before?
I don't think I have. I'm a journalist. That's my day gig. I've written about home brewers and artisan brewers and microbrewers and all that stuff. I've seen wort and I've smelled it and all that. I don't think I've ever.
Yeah. So it's sort of like a porter.
It is. Yeah.
But it's also sort of like
this is really nice.
It's like a porter and a Coca-Cola all in one thing.
A porter and a Coca-Cola, you bet. Well, anyway, what we do, Clyde is Clyde's a libertarian, and I am a conservative, and we're both fairly purist about each of our positions. But part of the reason we wanted to do this when we got it going was that there's a fair amount of Venn diagram overlap between us. We both believe that in the primacy of human freedom, it's indispensable to human flourishing, that life's really not worth living without it. Anyway, there are things that we see a few things even within that framework differently, and that fall outside the Venn diagram, and that's interesting too. We appreciate feedback. We love it that we're getting an increasing number of followers, and so anyway, thanks for joining us. And as you said, we do this fortnightly and forthrightly, so you'll want to be sure and tune back in 2 weeks.
So go ahead and hit the subscribe button now.
Yes.
Do us a favor. But let's talk about the
Yeah.
life and legacy of Herman Cain.
Oh, yeah. What an interesting guy. Born in Memphis, but basically raised in Atlanta. Went to Morehouse College, I believe. Yeah, Morehouse College, and got a bachelor's of science in math. Worked for a while. Well, he got a graduate degree in computer science from Purdue University, and then why he did that while he was working as a ballistics analyst for the U.S. Department of Navy as a civilian. Then he completed his master's degree at Purdue and left to become to work for the Coca-Cola Company as a computer systems analyst. In 1977, he moved to Minneapolis to join Pillsbury. And the interesting thing is his father had been a chauffeur for the CEO of Coca-Cola during Herman Cain's growing up years. It was one of the many jobs that Herman Cain's father held down to make sure they could buy a house, and while his kids were still young.
I've got a great clip on that regard too. So
okay. Well, and I'll just say.
Keep going.
Then he went to Pillsbury, which is headquartered in Minneapolis, and they first put him with the Burger King chain and said, "Hey, we got 400 stores in the Philadelphia area that are not doing well at all. Can you turn them around?" And he did that, and they said, "We're very impressed. We're going to make you CEO of our Godfather's Pizza chain." And he similarly turned that around. It involved shedding some properties and some personnel, but they brought it back to profitability. And he and a partner bought it from Pillsbury. And then he became the head of the National Restaurant Association. Trade associations are very important to the American socioeconomic fabric. Seeing that their interests are expressed to Congress and that kind of thing. And then he was the head of the Kansas City Federal Reserve, and then he became a talk show host and author, and
just an amazing guy.
And
a presidential candidate.
Absolutely.
With 2012 he ran.
Yeah,
and he was the first Republican candidate to ever lead the polls in the primaries, I understand.
Interesting factoid. That's really cool. But he's always been a very articulate spokesperson for the cause of human freedom. As a matter of fact, he's got a philosophy, and he wrote a book with the philosophy as its title, CEO of the Self. The idea being that you're in charge of yourself. Yeah. Consider yourself being in charge of yourself, and conduct your life accordingly.
Yeah, good stuff.
Which I think is a very cool idea. And then, of course, he's the 999 man. When he ran for president in 2012, he proposed this 999.
Yeah, I thought the 999 plan was actually quite brilliant. I mean, some people called him on the math of it specifically, but I think
the idea of being 9% personal income tax, 9% federal sales tax, and a 9% corporate tax. Never fool with that. Set it in place, and whoever gets rich or gets poor or any of that stuff, never mind that. Just have that be.
Yeah, and the revenue that generates, that is your budget. Deal with it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Figure out how to deal with it. And a lot of people criticized him. I remember there was George Papanopoulos, or however you say his name. He was being interviewed in when he was running for president, and he's calling Cain out, basically saying, "Well, how are you going to pay for all this? We ran the numbers, and you're not going to bring in as much revenue." And I wish Cain had, gone a little bit more to bat to all the stuff he was going to cut, or that he was going to put the kibosh on. But he didn't really defend it. But I think the 999 plan is actually really quite brilliant at its core. It might not pay for everything that we currently.
Which is why then the other thing you got to do concurrently is look at where you're going to cut.
Yeah. But he's a really fascinating guy, and it's really a shame that he's passed away.
Oh, yeah.
And the vitriol from the left has been really disgusting. He contracted COVID-19. Everyone assumes
at a Trump rally.
Everyone assumes it's at the Trump rally, but no one has any proof of that, and can't have any proof of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's sort of in the danger category. He was a stage 4 liver cancer survivor.
Yes, he was. Yeah, that's correct. I had forgotten about
So
that.
when he ran in 2012, they were asking him, like, how can we be sure about your health?
Correct.
When you've
I
had
remember that.
all these health problems, and he
Yeah.
gave the all clear. I'm cancer free. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
I don't know what his at the time of his death what his cancer situation was. I have no idea. But apparently he did die from complications of COVID-19, and
Um, yeah.
that's very sad, and it's really sick to see people going, he's
Yeah.
such a bad person, and he deserves it, and that's what you get, and that kind of stuff. Just
You're seeing that, no doubt. And now, to be sure, I became disappointed with Herman Cain in over the last 5 years. He's a committed conservative, and always has been. He's one of those who his thought processes brought him around to being enthusiastic for Trump, not just like, well, we got to beat Hillary, and now we got to beat Joe Biden. I mean, he's very supportive. I mean, hands-on supportive. He's organized things for him and all that.
yeah.
So but there are people who I still respect and admire to some degree, who came to that conclusion, and that's what they did. And that, which is an example of what, you do what you can to extend grace in this brittle world of ours, but which I don't really have to do too much with Herman Cain, because I do greatly admire him.
Yeah.
The overall arc of his life is such that, he's one,
and I have some disagreements with him on foreign policy, obviously, as I do with most conservatives and conservative Republicans. But I think that Cain's life and legacy was full of things to admire.
His faith meant a lot to him. I don't think he ever professionally recorded, but he did make demo recordings of himself singing gospel music that he gave people as gifts and stuff. I should have researched this more thoroughly, but my understanding is that, and what I'm recalling from people saying things during the 2012 campaign, that he's got a very good voice for singing gospel music.
Well, that's something I did not know.
And that his faith means a great deal to him.
And you can hear that's apparent in a lot of his speaking engagements and such. But the reason why he's a controversial figure, though, is because he's a black conservative, and I think that the black conservative is one of the bravest positions to take, because you're basically going against the common thought that black people have to be Democrats and black people have to be liberals. And you might weigh conservative versus liberal versus something else and come out as a liberal, having made a value judgment. I understand that. I'm fine with that. But I think the chances of you being indoctrinated or being, just growing up around the leftist type of attitude is high. And he comes out with a perspective very different from his peers. So, and I think that's a lot to do with his upbringing. So I want to play some clips from the new Larry Elder movie, who's another black conservative. Larry Elder made a movie recently called Uncle Tom, all about the black conservative movement. And Herman Cain appears in it multiple times. And I'm just going to play a few clips from that movie, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
All right. Here's Herman Cain talking about success.
I focus on three things: performance, performance, performance. The three things that are my guiding lights: belief in God, belief in myself, and my belief in the United States of America. I learned it from that man right there. My dad worked 3 jobs until he could live off of 2, and he worked 2 until he could live off of 1. He used to be a chauffeur for the Coca-Cola Company. And then one day he was asked to drive for the chairman and CEO, Robert W. Woodruff. It was like a 24/7, 7-day-a-week job. I never heard him complain about having to work so hard. I never heard him complain about what the government didn't do to help us. We were poor, but we didn't know it. We didn't have people screaming at us all the time telling us we were poor. My dad encouraged my brother and I to get as much education as you can, because he worked in an environment where the most successful people were the ones that had the greatest amount of education. Success does not come in a straight line. It's a zigzag.
Some pretty good stuff there, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. Real wisdom in that.
And I think this is sort of why he polarizes, or why the left shunned him so much, because he was very much that pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of attitude. And the left hates that because, you know, and rightly so, they'll often say, well, what if you don't have any bootstraps or even any boots, you know? And Herman Cain was always the kind of guy who was like, well, go out and find a way to get yourself some boots. And this next clip, I just love this. You could see how his arc of success just kept going and going and going. And it was because he realized the state of the world was the state of the world. Then rather than push back on the state of the world, he decided to improve himself over and over and over again. And this is
I mean, the arc, the breadth of what he did. You know, he was a computer scientist and ran a trade association and ran a restaurant chain. You know, Federal Reserve. I mean, it's just
and he builds this this skill set and this talent stack that carried him through all of those vastly impressive careers. But this clip is a little bit long, but it goes through some of that stuff, some of his career arc.
I had a college student ask me one time, how did you deal with color and race when you were climbing the corporate ladder? My answer, I didn't. Let them deal with it. I didn't focus on that. I didn't have time. I went to the president of the Pillsbury Company and said, I need to get involved in some other aspects of the corporation because I want to run one of the business units one day. So he said, we need a lot of leadership in Burger King. You have to go and spend 2 weeks at Whopper College. There really is a Whopper College in Miami. I graduated summa cum laude. I was working for the Department of the Navy. The same day that I started, another white gentleman named Robert started working there also. We had very similar jobs. So the first 12 months, I got outstanding performance 4 quarters in a row. Second year, outstanding performance 4 quarters in a row. And Robert got outstanding performance. But Robert was getting his GS salary increase at least 2 months sooner than me. So I went to Wayne, my supervisor, and said, Robert and I are both doing a great job. He said, yeah. So why is he getting little increases quicker than me? He said, he has a master's degree. I said, oh, it's not because he's white? Nope. He has a master's degree. So you know what I did? I didn't get mad. I went and got me a master's degree.
There are only 4 rungs to this ladder.
Went back, sat down with Wayne. I said, well, I got a master's degree. I said, the next time you have opening for a promotion, I said, keep me in mind. See you around. And not long after that, they had a special project called a Rocket Assisted Projector. They had to have someone who was going to be the GS-13 supervisory mathematician to do the special ballistics on this Rocket Assisted Projector. I got the promotion. And I had 8 white people working for me. It was all about performance, not the color of your skin. So since I now had that master's degree and I had proved myself, I got the job. When I decided to leave Dahlgren, never forget the department head, and he called me in for an exit interview. And I never forget Russ. I think he's deceased now. He said, you know, you have taught me something. I said, what? He said, I had never worked with a black person before. You taught me don't judge somebody by the color of their skin.
History will look kindly on Herman Cain. He made important contributions on a number of levels.
And I think this is why a lot of people get, getting a tizzy when he speaks or when he spoke, because he was an unapologetic capitalist. And I've got one 30-second clip left here that I want to play. That just I love his attitude. I love his snark, and I just love the way he puts things.
Okay.
As my late grandfathers used to say, who lived to be 94, I does not care. Because he didn't have a lot of education. He said, I does not care. So I don't care if they call me names. You know, just meet me at the bank. And we'll compare bank accounts.
I just think that's awesome. He's just like, okay, he proves that the recipe is dedication, success, hard work,
Yeah.
And I don't know, he will be missed.
Yeah, very important figure. Well, okay, is it time to go on to, they really said that?
Yep.
Here's the situation. Back in the Most Equal Comrade era, in the MEC era, I'm speaking of Barack Obama. Barack Obama pushed through an initiative called the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule. And it was, I think it was executive overreach. It's the kind of thing that should have been either voted up or down as a piece of legislation on Capitol Hill. But, and Stanley Kurtz, who has always had Barack Obama's number, he wrote a very good book, I don't know, I think about 2010, called Radical in Chief. But anyway, Stanley Kurtz wrote it at National Review 5 years ago in 2015. AFFH is easily one of President Obama's most radical initiatives, on a par with Obamacare in its transformative potential. In effect, AFFH gives the federal government a lever to re-engineer nearly every American neighborhood, imposing a preferred racial and ethnic composition, densifying housing and transportation and business development in suburb and city alike, and weakening or casting aside the authority of local governments over core responsibilities, from zoning to transportation to education. And so he had the number of that way back then. It went through anyway. It was radical social engineering and distortion of the market, but it went through anyway because our country was so giddy about having the Most Equal Comrade as our president.
And do you know who the HUD chairman was at the time?
No, I refresh my memory.
I do believe it was Julian Castro, who just ran in the most recent Democratic primary.
Oh, yes, I believe you're correct, yes. And so he would have certainly been on board with it. And so, okay, it's one of these things like pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord, which I applauded. I'm a conservative. I thought that was great. Pulling out of the agreement with Iran about their nuclear program. I thought that was great. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem. I thought that was great. The judges he's appointed. I thought that was great. But he usually finds some way to tarnish his own great policy moves, and such is the case here. The very stable genius, that would be Donald Trump, tweets the other day, "I'm happy to inform all of the people living their suburban lifestyle dream that you will no longer be bothered or financially hurt by having low-income housing in your neighborhood." But he doesn't explain any of the principle behind it, that the market ought to decide what housing prices are in any given part of a city, and who's going to gravitate to make the decision to live there, and all this stuff that all you freedom lovers and I know. And he goes on and says, "I'm happy to inform all of the people living their suburban lifestyle dream," and he chooses to capitalize S, L, and D for some reason, "that you will no longer be bothered or financially hurt by having low-income housing." And the Democrat and leftist attack ads write themselves.
Oh yeah.
We don't want those smelly, lazy, criminal element in our nice neighborhood of upright people. And it's it doesn't take any rhetorical effort at all to construe a racist overtone to it, and which here he does this great move. He could have just done the move and not even think about bragging on himself, but he has to brag on himself, and then which leads to articulating it in the most boneheaded way possible.
It's articulated in a very boneheaded way. The thing about this law, this effort, was that it took the regulatory power away from the municipality that was concerned, right? So they would put these sort of like gerrymandering, like you pick the districts where you vote, or the Congress does, and they do that in a way so they get the outcome that they want. So they can bucket out the Republicans here and the Democrats here, and that way we always get the vote from this section.
Right.
The same thing with this law. They would put vast areas in the same bucket, and you might have a vastly different cultures there. You might encompass a major city and then a large rural area. And so once the areas take the HUD grants, then they are obligated to play by the federal government's rules in those areas. And those rules would include targets for race, ethnicity, density, population density, things like that. It's like, well, if you couldn't organically meet those anyway, what exactly hoops do you have to jump through in order to artificially make them happen? And then your city or your county can no longer make the rules because now it's in the federal government's court. And Trump could have just made a point in a tweet to say, hey, local governments, cities, municipalities, townships, counties, we've just given you more power to decide, how property is used in your own areas and enable you to keep property values high and whatever.
And respect the unique character of your area, its heritage, and and all the things that go into making any given locale in this country what it is. Yeah.
So and I've been critical of a lot of people on the left for trying to call Trump a racist at every single turn.
Yeah, I get tired of that too.
I get really tired of it, and in a lot of cases, it's been really, just they're pulling things out of the air and saying things that absolutely did not happen. But for him to approach it in this way, man, it really tells me that this was the first thing on his mind, was getting those smelly poor neighborhoods moved out, and there may or may not be a racial component to that, you know what I mean? But there's definitely a class component to it. It's still pretty gross.
A wide open opportunity to paint Republicans as bigots and snobs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, Republicans are trying to make the case that they're the party of the working man, not the Democrats. And boy, this sure shot that to hell,
Yeah. His tone deafness just never ceases to astound me.
But there's a lot of people who probably have, are affected by this situation in this exact way, who are probably like, yeah, get him out of here.
So many things don't get talked about that need to be. Individual choice and mindsets that start permeating neighborhoods and subcultures and what goes into the rise or fall of property values and just all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, and you get into things like zoning and let's take again the always present villain in every situation, the private market, right?
Yeah.
So they're talking about in this law, the goal is, in a lot of cases, density. So you could put low-cost housing, and you can cram more people into less space, But try to do that as a private entrepreneur wanting to build, high capacity, densely populated, low cost housing, right? I mean, the amount of bureaucracy and regulations and hoops you'd have to go through in order to do that kind of thing would be astounding. And this here takes it even to a next level, because now you're dealing with the federal government, who's even further detached from from what the actual market in the area even needs.
Yeah.
How many people there are that need housing? What their average incomes are, and that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. Good move, and then he just dumped garbage all over, which he routinely does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, yeah. Again, you could spin this in positive ways, where it would be hard to argue with it, even from the other side of the aisle. But then he didn't do that.
Yeah.
So. All right.
Well, this is another one about Donald Trump's Twitter habit, and this really alarmed a lot of people, me included. I don't know. How about you, Clyde?
It goes back and forth for me.
All right. Here's the situation. He's not a fan of mail-in voting, which it's the same thing as absentee voting. Factcheck.org. Robert Farley did an exhaustive study in June of this year on demonstrating that. But Donald Trump has this real aversion to mail-in voting, as if it's just highly susceptible. And I know you, Clyde. You've got an idea that says we can put this whole argument to rest right now by going to completely online. And we want to talk about something safe and foolproof. But anyway, so and we can come back to that. But BSG says that 2020 will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent, and of course those words are capitalized, election in history. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA. And he says, delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote, followed with 3 question marks, which I'm sure he did so, hey, he was just posing a question and that kind of thing. But you think about some developments that have happened since then, like the post office getting hours cut and that kind of thing. But there's some developments that have happened afterward that lead me to believe that he was not, just making wild speculation or trying to make a joke or anything. That he was a little more serious than that. And the people that have objected to it, including Marco Rubio, he said he can suggest whatever he wants. The law is what it is. We're going to have an election.
Well, that's the point, right?
Election that's legitimate. Senator Chuck Grassley also said it doesn't matter what any one individual in this country says. We still have a country based on the rule of law. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said no way we would ever not hold an election on the day that we have it. And then Henry Olson of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, who has been a conservative. He's not an out-and-out diehard Trumpist, but he's been irritatingly enthusiastic about the Trump era, but he has now distanced himself. He wrote a op-ed for the Washington Post in which he said, this is just beyond the pale, and also Steve Calabrese, co-founder of the Federalist Society, a very conservative legal organization from which has made the suggestions to the Trump administration that have turned into judicial appointments up into and including the Supreme Court. And Calabrese says this latest tweet is fascistic and itself grounds for impeachment again. I
think that's a little bit hyperbolic.
Well, but it comes from
tweet
guy,
can't be grounds for impeachment, but yeah.
Yeah, but okay, and I understand. But the fact is, this alarmed a lot of people, a lot of conservatives and Republicans, some of whom had been rather supportive of Trump up to this point. It concerns me a great deal.
First of all, it's just a tweet for now.
Yeah.
We spoke offline not too long ago, and I had made the point that I used to just kind of think every time he was tweeting, it was just brainstorming out loud. He just throws everything out there all the time, and you have to take all of it sort of with a grain of salt. But a lot of that stuff kind of becomes future, and he does this where he'll sow the seed for something, right? He'll mention something, and even if it's in a negative context, he floats an idea, and now your brain's considering it, and now everyone's mad about it, but pretty soon that'll pass, and it'll still be in people's brains that there might be a possibility that the election is delayed, right? And people are going to be more comfortable with it now because the idea has been floated out there.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's any great fascistic situation. It might be. I might have a personal interest in that because I've been calling people out for Trump derangement syndrome when they've been going, he's never going to leave office, and I really don't want them to be right for my own sake. But I just think he wants more time for the economy to recovery. It's going to look really bad if he is the president at the time of the greatest economic fiasco in history, and there should be a big recovery coming. I mean, the economy is very robust, and even as lots of businesses fail and markets tank, as soon as new technologies and different strategies, as long as the government is out of the way, the economy should take off. I think he just wants to wait it out.
Okay.
Makes him look better, makes him look more electable.
But once again, at the very least, he picked the most boneheaded way he could have to set about accomplishing that.
Yeah. So, what do you think what are the federal guidelines around this? I mean, I know that he can't just executive order and say it's delayed. This is a congressional process that would have to go into consideration, right?
Yeah. The federal law that
it's not like it's invading a country, which you can do.
Yeah, right.
Without Congress.
The federal law that established the first Tuesday in November was passed in 1845, and it's federal code that nobody's ever even thought about messing with, since then. I mean, we had an election on the first Tuesday in November in 1864, which arguably the most crisis-ridden point in our history.
Mm-hmm.
We had one in 1944 at the height of World War II.
Mm-hmm. But there's not. But in those situations, there wasn't a real danger to the people going to the polling stations, right?
Yeah, and a peril to the process itself.
Right.
I don't think there is now.
Yeah. You don't think that there's a danger to the people going to the polls from COVID-19?
You mean? Oh, I see. COVID-19.
I mean, not that doesn't affect the law.
No. I didn't quite understand.
That doesn't affect the law, but it does affect the.
I don't think there. No. Now that I know what you're saying, there is some peril, which argues for at least having mail-in as an option.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like with this whole question of reopening schools. I think the cities that are going to be most successful are the ones who offer a lot of options to parents and families and students. The ones who can incorporate as much flexibility as possible into their plans. And same with voting, I think, But now I want to give you a chance to explain how we could solve all this quite quickly and move on and have a nice, free, fair election.
Well, for one, I don't think you need to have mail-in voting. I think that Trump is actually onto something here. I don't have any data to back up the idea that a paper mail-in voting system would be fraught with fraud and errors. But I mean, Jesus, of course it would be. I mean, all you have to do is make a couple of boxes disappear. You know what I mean? Like they made Jeffrey Epstein disappear. They can make a couple of boxes of ballots, disappear. and there's just the mail is very, very susceptible to fraud. I really don't think that they need to halt the in-person thing. We've gotten this social distancing thing down pretty well. You can require a mask. You can keep people standing 6 feet apart, 10 feet apart, 20 feet apart. You could open more polling stations so that people don't have to congregate in so many places. You could even you could even say you have a specific polling place. You have a specific polling place in our county, but it's not enforced. You can go vote at any polling site in the county, even though you have one that's sort of yours. But you could just be like, hey, we have only so many spots available. You have to go to this place. You could even say you have to go to it during this time, so that you just keep people apart.
Arrange your life accordingly so that you can go and vote.
That's absolutely right. They do it at my family and I just went to Florida. We went to Universal Studios, and as many people as wanted to go to Universal Studios pretty much could, and it was empty. So people are going to separate themselves. People are going to stay home. But we would go on a ride or something like that, and after the ride, they would come in and wipe down the whole situation. They would close it off. We just went to the Indianapolis Children's Museum. We'd go into one of the exhibits. We'd see the thing, and then after 15 minutes, they'd close the exhibit. They'd sanitize everything and open it back up. You could do the same thing with polling stations.
Okay.
But you could move the whole.
But you said that completely online voting is something that could be implemented right now.
Yes, you could move the whole thing online and make it more secure and more efficient and better than it's ever been before. And it should have broad support by Democrats and Republicans alike, and I'll list out why. You could do it through a web portal. Everybody already has a unique voter ID. That might be your social security number. There might be a voter ID number, your legal residency number, things like that. So everyone in the country has a legal, unique identifying number of some kind. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're already there where you can identify yourself as a voter, right? Or at least as a unique entity. So we don't count somebody twice or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you would have to do it in a sort of like a blockchain approach. So it's like the way Bitcoin is. Bitcoin's created in blockchain technology so that the information is spread out amongst the web, so as not to be able to be destroyed or tampered with by any one of the nodes that host it.
Yeah. Okay.
So that makes it tamper-proof. You can keep the login pretty secure with 2-factor or even 3-factor authentication, strong passwords, stuff like that. And then everybody gets one vote. You could vote on your computer. You could vote on your smartphone. You could download an app, which could also have an identifying situation. If you didn't have access to some of these things, which, smartphones are cheap these days. Internet access is cheap these days. Almost everyone has it. So don't give me that garbage that some people can't access that. That's true, but that's a very, very small number of people, and you could easily have a polling place open where they could use a public web portal. They could vote at the library. They could vote anywhere.
Yeah.
And you could do it for people that didn't have access to the internet or to a smartphone or things like that. For anybody, really. You could vote anytime. You could just, your vote has to be in by November, by the first Tuesday in November. And if it's not, you didn't vote. But you can vote any day. You can vote any day of the year. And if you don't change your vote, it goes through. But you can change it all the way up until Election Day. And I think Democrats should support it because it's green. Mail-in votes are going to be an enormous carbon footprint just to create all the damn paper, and then it's going to be a huge landfill situation, or even burden to the recycling system, which is still a huge carbon footprint. There's also no need for an ID, because once you create your unique login, it's connected to your ID number. You're being authenticated in a different way. You don't need to have a physical ID. And the left is always saying that some people don't have access to getting a legal ID, which I think is horseshit. But that's their claim. So this solves that problem for them.
Yeah.
And Republicans should support it, because there would be no illegal voting. There'd be no you couldn't tamper with it, for one, and people who were non-legal residents or dead couldn't vote.
Yeah. Well, B and C viewers and listeners, please chime in on this. We'd love to get your input. He's put forth something that I think ought to spur some interesting discussion. Chime in on the comment thread under our YouTube page or our Facebook page, or email us. But please, chime in on this one. I think.
Yeah, and if I got something wrong, let me know.
Raised something that. Yeah.
I mean, I think that the technology exists today to do the whole thing, but if I got something wrong, let me know, and I'll make sure to make the correction or whatever. Okay.
All right. About time for
let's move on to Ain't Nobody's Business But My Own.
Yeah. Okay. Americans are more reluctant than ever to express themselves on ideological, political, and cultural matters. A survey shows that back in 1954, 13% of Americans felt reluctant to express their feelings. It had grown to 48 in 2015, and it's still 40 in 2019. It was still 40 in 2019. A Cato Institute YouGov national survey found 62% of Americans say the political climate today prevents them from saying what they believe, and it includes 77% of Republicans, 59% of independents, and 52% of Democrats. So more than half of each of those swaths of the spectrum feel that way. I sort of feel as if social media reflects the basics of human nature. When Facebook came along, this is going to be so cool. We'll get in touch with our old high school friends and show pictures of our pets and of our vacations and wish each other happy birthday and all that kind of stuff. And but it didn't take any time at all for Facebook to also become a minefield, where people just routinely eviscerate each other and so forth. Twitter's just as bad, if not worse. I think it's spread to Instagram and so forth. And so it's really a reflection of how brittle we let our society become. I guess there's kind of a chicken or egg thing to it. Is it fomenting it, or is it a reflection of it? But and we are. It started out with academia, where conservatives could not speak their mind in the faculty room and that kind of thing. But it's spread to entertainment, the music and movie worlds. Conservatives need to kind of keep it zipped, at least for the most part, unless they've found some unique way to work around it. But and the corporate world, a person can jeopardize his job for expressing things that in an atmosphere where companies are increasingly taking positions on things.
That's the problem.
A large percentage of their employees may not be on board with.
That's the problem, is that companies are becoming, politically outspoken.
Yeah. And
they don't allow for dissent. So the corporation takes a political stance. And I understand that a corporation might have to take a little bit of a political stance, and maybe regulations surrounding the industry they're in, or something like that.
Like I said earlier, trade associations are a very important part.
But for companies to get involved in identity politics and it's fine if and I think it should be celebrated if companies want to look internally and say, we really need to work on diversity inside of our ranks, and we want to be better at, hiring minorities and making sure that everyone in our communities where we operate have the right opportunities. I think that's admirable. But to take, political positions that are just expedient in the common thought that gets them social points and that are anti-science or anti-data, I think is pretty gross. And not allowing people within the company to raise concerns that, hey, you might have gotten this one wrong. You saw this with the James Damore situation at Google when they were talking about getting more females in tech. And he wrote a long paper showing all the reasons why women often choose not to go into tech. Not how tech discriminates against women, but why women choose not to go into tech. And here's some of the things that we can do to solve that problem, to get more women in tech. Yeah. That was his goal. But because the narrative was that big tech discriminates against women, he was booted out.
And this is even now spreading to the realm of religion. The United Methodist Church, the UMC, was on the verge of splitting in half over the whole question of non-heterosexual marriage and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Didn't they already split once?
Traditional conservative, if you will, Methodists were probably going to wind up in an organization called the Wesleyan Covenant Association, and the progressive, if you will, bunch were going to retain the name UMC. There was a pretty equitable agreement in the works, dividing actual church property on the level of individual congregations and stuff. It was going to work out equitably, with everybody being real sad that it was going to come about. But it was going to happen at the convention this year, and the convention was called off because of COVID. So everybody's there's this tension within the denomination that's got to go for at least another year. But meanwhile, and there are tension within individual congregations, people you've worshiped next to for years and years. Which side are they on? Mm-hmm. And those kinds of, those questions linger in the air, and it's just, I guess in a sense, it's no wonder we've gotten to this point, because everything's just been getting more and more brittle.
I'm sorry, it's when you can't speak out on mundane topics. Like, I guarantee you that everyone in those church pews values human life and doesn't want anyone to suffer. There's certain frameworks of society that they might slightly diverge on, but why would you have this animosity for people, and think that they're evil, disgusting, vile people you can't sit next to in church?
Yeah, well, everybody's afraid that the other person's going to think that. I mean,
they're going to think that. Yeah, they probably will think that, but people think that because things are so damn good in society these days that those are the kinds of problems that we have to talk about. This person has a slightly diverging view on on whatever the issue is. This person thinks that trans women are women, but they don't want to say the word Z or Zer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, you're a Nazi. You're obviously a Nazi. I can't sit next to you in church. It's no wonder people don't want to speak out.
Yeah. But those are some telling numbers, those surveys. I don't know that I've drawn a hard and fast conclusion about their significance, but telling numbers.
Yeah, and I think that it's hard to tell from those kinds of numbers, because I think because people are afraid to speak out, sometimes they're not willing to come off with the truth either.
Yeah.
I mean, and this permeates the entire West. I had a friend from the UK. I think we talked about this once before, but
okay.
A friend of mine from the UK during Brexit was over, and it was between the first and second vote. And I asked him, I was like, hey, did you vote for it or against it? And we're sitting at this bar having a beer, and it's really late. There's nobody else in the place except like the bartender. And
he's thousands of miles from the UK. Yeah.
He's thousands of miles from home, from where it matters, from where he knows, almost anybody. And he leans over and whispers, "I voted for it," And it's like, you're ashamed to say it, because you're not allowed to hold that opinion.
I guess as close as I'd come to a conclusion is saying that it doesn't seem to be moving us in the direction of enhanced freedom.
That's the biggest problem that's facing us today is not being able to communicate. You know, everyone's assumptions run rampant, and we can't have meaningful discourse about any topic. And social media just makes it worse. You know, you start reading those lines of text, and you put whatever inflection on that text that you want it to have or you think it has. You know, and I remember reading a couple things. I'm like, God, my friend is spitting vitriol at me that I wouldn't get from them in person. And then I'm thinking about it. Well, are they really, or am I reading their tone of voice and applying a tone of voice that's not really intended from them?
Yeah. Well, listen. Thanks to all you long timers, our longtime supporters for tuning in, but. To any newcomers, we do this fortnightly and forthrightly, so we hope to be with you again in 2 weeks, and hope you understand. Now you can see some of what we do. He brings a conservative.
You keep calling me the conservative. I think there's something here. I think there's something going on here.
We kick around four issues each time, and we've been really gratified by the increasing support. Chime in on anything you've heard today via the ways you can do so. Comment thread under our YouTube page or our Facebook page, or email us. Or
comment threads are probably the best. Yeah. You can also send us direct messages on Facebook or Twitter.
Sure.
You can email us at barneyandclydeshow@gmail.com. You can support us at patreon.com/BarneyandClyde. But the biggest thing you can do, if you want to help us out right now in a non-monetary way, the best way you could help us out right now is go to Apple and give us a 5-star rating, or give us whatever star rating you think we deserve. But obviously it's going to be 5, you know. So give us a rating. And it takes so many people to actually rate for the ratings to even show up. And I'm not sure how many people that is, but just because I rate it 5 stars and Barney rates it 5 stars, that doesn't even put us on the board. We need 100 people to go
help us move the needle
and rate us something. And if you rate us high, we appreciate it. If you rate us low, we'll fix whatever the problem is.
Yeah, sure. And please visit Late in the Day, which is my blog, where I generally post at least once daily and sometimes more, and my Substack newsletter, which is called Precipice, where I post a couple times a week. At least I hope to, and feel free to leave feedback at those as well.
That sounds great. And until
the
next fortnight,
stay vigilant about your freedom.
Well, that's an interesting development.